Well, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here, but I have to say I'm a little terrified because just being in this room with the most brilliant women on this campus, it's amazing to me. So, but I am passionate about this topic. I feel that I have been studying work for over 2 decades. So I arrived at the university in 1998 and have been here ever since. And my research really comes from my experience as an organizational psychologist. And as an organizational psychologist, I'm really interested in studying workers, their experience at work, and workplace well-being, and how we can make work better. I'm at the Carlson School, but there's a little bit of blasphemy here. I really care about workers. I don't care so much about the business organizations and profits and things like that. So sometimes I'm a little bit of a misfit at the Carlson School. What I'm really interested in is the experience of people at work and how we can improve that. So what I'm going to do today is just take you through a little bit of my research journey. As Pam mentioned, about this time last year I gave a TED Talk, and a TEDx talk here at the university. And in preparation for that talk, it gave me pause to sort of say, okay, what do I do with all this? What do I do with this 2 decades of research on people at work, and how can I go out and actually help people to improve their work lives? So that's sort of the talk. What I'm going to do is sort of toggle back and forth, tell you a little bit about my research, and then how you can apply it. And I've got a light bulb here because I really hope that everyone will walk away with just one new idea. And I'm going to blast you with lots. Some will resonate with you, some will not. But if everybody could walk away with like, hey, I'm going to try that. I'm going to just give that one a try. That would be a huge win for me. Okay. So I'll start, though, with a story. And the story is from this morning. And the story is really from every morning. Every morning, when I drop my kids off at school, I have a 12-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl. And every morning when I drop them off, I say to them, work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present. Work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present. And I say it to them, they say it back to me, and we go about our day in a very intentional way. And as I was working on the TED Talk, it hit me like a light bulb in a coffee shop one day. Oh my gosh, our family motto, these are my research themes. These are 4 pillars that I look at in my research. So that's the story that I'm going to take you through and tell you about these 4 themes in my research. I'm going to, Mara set us up great for the be present piece, so good thing that's at the end in case I run out of time. But before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about how I do the research. So one of the techniques that I use very frequently is something called experience sampling. And when I was in graduate school, I really wanted to study mood at work. So the challenge in studying mood at work is that it's highly variable, right? If I ask you your mood at like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday versus 2 p.m. on a Friday, it's probably going to be quite different. So how do you capture that variability? Well, there's a technique called experience sampling, where we basically try and sample from workers' experiences. And we kind of drop into their day and we ask them, what are you doing? What's your stress level like? What's your mood? What's been going on for you over the last little while on the job? And we'll do this about 4 or 5 times a day, just kind of randomly ping people. Now, when I started this work, we used a Palm Pilot. Does anybody remember the Palm Pilot? Yes. It was very sophisticated. It could, you could keep your contacts in there. You could make some notes. Your calendar was there. I think there was a calculator. But the other thing it could do is we could program this to administer surveys. And so if you were a participant in our study, we'd hand you a Palm-top computer, and it would randomly signal you throughout the day over the course of about 3 weeks. And what this does is it gives us a really rich picture of working life. And we would do this in different types of organizations, different types of workers, and it gives us information about that rich texture. Okay, so that's most of what I'm going to be talking about. A lot of the research is in that kind of a paradigm. Okay, so let's get to work hard. So with this research where we're asking people several times a day what's happening for you at work, one of the questions we wanted to answer was, when people are in really good moods at work, when they're at those peak moods, what's going on for them? And at first we were sort of cynical, like they're probably at lunch. But, but that's not what we found. What we found was that, and this is across different organizations and occupations, people were in the best moods when they reported that they had accomplished a goal or were making meaningful progress on their work tasks. This was the most significant driver and consistent driver of a positive mood at work. And we kind of know this intuitively, right? Like if we're getting stuff done, if we're accomplishing things, if we've got a big piece of work before us and we can kind of get immersed in that, it feels really good. Feels good to do that. So we know that this is sort of the peak mood state, but the problem is sometimes we can't really find ways to accomplish those work tasks, right? And make that meaningful progress. There's a lot of things that are in our way. Sometimes our work environments aren't really set up so that we can do that because we're going from meeting to meeting, or we're answering emails or being very distracted. And so we have this, on the one hand, this is something that will improve our work mood, but it's difficult to do. And I'll share another piece of research where we looked at how people allocated their time at work. And we asked them, how do you want to allocate your time at work? Into 3 big buckets, okay? And these 3 buckets happen to be research, service, and teaching. So this is a faculty sample. How do you want to allocate your time? How do you actually allocate your time, right? And then we looked at the disconnect, the discrepancy between those. And what we found was that when people were feeling depletion, and in particular, depletion from work and family demands, something that we've been talking a lot about here today, what we found was when people were depleted, that discrepancy was larger. They were more likely to be kind of knocked off their goals for how they wanted to allocate their time. And they were knocked off those goals in a very particular direction. When people were depleted, we allocate more time to tasks that are less complex, those tasks that we won't work on those tasks that have kind of the long range delay of gratification sorts of things. We're more likely to just sort of do those things which we can kind of quickly try and complete, but not like the big, hard, deep strategic work. Now this self-discrepancy it's not just bad because of your mood or other things, but there are significant job outcomes. People who had a larger disconnect were less satisfied. They had poorer psychological health. So they were more likely to just sort of have lower satisfaction with life. It's also linked to salary. So to the extent that, so we have these kind of two things here. We feel really good when we make progress on our work tasks, but when we're feeling depleted, we're more likely to be knocked off our intentions. So related to this idea is an idea that I'd like to share with you called parking downhill. Because one of the things is sort of like, all right, so we got these 2 ideas, now what to do? One of my favorite tips for people is parking downhill. And this is what parking downhill looks like for me. Parking downhill is basically the notion that you want to get ready to get into your work, right? So if you look at this cute little beetle bug there, imagine sitting in that car and taking your foot off the brake. It's parked downhill. You're going to start to quickly, there's potential energy there, and you're going to, once you take your foot off the brake, you can quickly kind of get going, right? And you can pick up momentum, pick up speed. How do you park downhill with your work tasks? Here's what it looks like for me. So the night before work, I'll think about, what do I need to accomplish tomorrow? What's the big chunk of work that I want to tackle? And I will pull everything that I need to get that piece of work done, right? So it might be, maybe I need to read a student's dissertation, or I need to work on this paper, or I've got to write a review. And I go out to email or go wherever I'm going, and I get all that ready, and it's open on my computer. Drop my kids off at school. I work a lot in coffee shops. In fact, my daughter once told someone that I work at a coffee shop when she was little. Oh, yes, of course, because I say I'm going to go work at the coffee shop. Anyway, so get to the coffee shop, and basically I open up my computer. There's the work, and I go to it. Sometimes now people are, oh, but don't you have emails coming in? Yes, of course I have emails coming in. Quickly look at them on the phone, nothing's blowing up, put it away. Work for about 90 minutes. Research would suggest that 90 minutes is kind of the chunk of time where you can effectively allocate and deploy your attention. And I'll tell you, at the end of that 90 minutes, that's when I check the email. That's when I bang a couple things out. Usually it's not 90 minutes, it's much longer because again, it feels good to kind of get those things done. Now, I think a lot of people start their days very differently. They get to work without an intention for what they're going to do, and they open up their email, and an hour and a half goes by, and they feel like they haven't got anything done, right? So how can you think about intention management? Think about how to manage those intentions. I put this here because it's related to two ideas that I like. The idea of flow. You may have heard of this term flow, like how do we get into a flow state? And I think our work environments aren't well set up for this. But as academics, we all know this, right? We've experienced this. We kind of know what it's like to be absorbed in our work and lose track of time and forget to eat and things like that. So how can we create our settings so that we're more able to do this? The other reason I like this image is there are these terms, these great terms that are referred to as deep and shallow work. Deep and shallow work. So a lot of us spend a good chunk of our day in that shallow workspace, right? And we need to sort of change that so that we have more time in that deep workspace. So how do we do that? Well, I'm all about creating some routines. And in fact, some of the examples here were great routines that people have established to try and deal with this. So a couple routine ideas, and again, here just sort of, I think of all of these ideas like panning for gold, right? Take what you like, leave the rest behind. So first thing is parking downhill. Think about how can I schedule some uninterrupted work time. We do have an incredible amount, I think Professor Cooper used the word unparalleled discretion in how we manage our time. I like that term because we do. So how can we take advantage of that and think about how do we schedule that uninterrupted work and how do we prepare those resources with more intentionality? We talk a lot about time management. I want you to think about intention management. What is my intention for the day? What is my intention for the week? What is my intention for the afternoon? And I think that'll get you to a slightly different place. Really try and resist email first thing in the morning. Email is, terrific, necessary, wonderful, but it's also can be, it can be a real bear. Thinking about small wins. For me, the way that I think about, we all have these really long to-do lists, right? Now, those things are not going to happen in a day. But if I can think, like, what's the one thing I need to do today? What is the one thing? Maybe I need to finish that paper review, or I need to read that dissertation. And then whenever I, have 20 minutes here, or, a meeting, I'm in between meetings there, I just maniacally go after that one thing. I don't go after the 27 things on the list for the week, I go after the one thing. And I just think about how to, just do it. Make work less fractured. And here, this might take some collaboration, but think about, there are organizations that say we're having email-free days where we're not going to be blasting each other with email on Thursdays. And sometimes that means instead you have a conversation or you pick up the phone, and it reduces that. Meeting-free days and times. I try and structure my day so that I have teaching days, meeting days, and writing days, and really chunk them up that way. So on those meeting days, I know I'm not going to get any writing done. I'm okay with that. On-call evenings. For some consulting firms, they've used, and for those of you who might have administrative responsibilities where you kind of do need to be always on call, thinking about, can I share this with other people so that I can have certain evenings where I'm not 24/7. Interruptions. So interruptions, there's a couple of tips for interruptions. When someone comes into your office and interrupts, stand up. So that's my, Now, it might, I mean, obviously it might feel a little weird sometimes to do that, but stand up, because you're signaling to people, you know, you are trying to have a meeting with me when it's convenient for you, but this may not be so convenient for me right now. Obviously, exceptions apply, but try and stand up. Now, the other thing in our research on interruptions, we found a really simple practice can mitigate the effects, the negative effects of an interruption. Because with an interruption, or even when you're switching tasks, you think that you've switched tasks, right? But in cognitive psychology and some of our work, we show there's something called attention residue. So even though you've switched that next task, your cognition is still with that last task. One way to stop that is to simply, we call it the ready to resume intervention, where you basically note, what's my next step here? What's my next step plan? It takes people 2 minutes to do this, and it completely erases that attention residue, just by kind of saying, all right, now I know how I'm going to get reabsorbed in this task. Meetings. Meetings. You know, our Carlson School is Carlson School of Management, CSOM, and we refer to it as Carlson School of Meetings, because there's a lot of meetings at the Carlson School. A couple things that we have not done at Carlson, but other organizations have done. Try and, you know, everybody thinks a meeting has to be an hour, and it doesn't, right? You can make your meeting however long the meeting needs to take. So try, you know, you can start playing with that time and kind of saying, you know, we're going to go 30 minutes and everyone's going to show up on time and we're going to end on time. And you might be able to take these hour-long meetings and get them down to 30 minutes. Standing meetings. Organizations have removed the conference tables and just have whiteboards. The standing meetings are a third shorter, and they also promote more creativity. So it might be something that you want to experiment with in your department. Thinking about agendas with time allocations. I know someone who, when they get a meeting invite, they say, great, I will accept your invite as soon as I've received the agenda. So I know if I have to even be there. Like, what am I doing at this meeting, right? How am I contributing? What's my role here? Trying to be more decisive. The Ohio rule. Has anybody heard the Ohio rule? Only handle it once, right? So often, you know, there's something, you know, maybe you get an email and you kind of have to think about it, and so you close it down, and then you go and you open that email again, and you're still not ready to act on it, so you close it down, and you kind of just keep doing that, right? Why do you keep doing that? Only handle it once. If you're not ready to act on it, don't be opening it. I've also started adding no reply needed to my emails, which is, and again, not to every single email, but we all are in these conditions where, you know, you'll send something out and they'll say, oh, that's a really interesting idea. I really like it. Okay, thank you. No, thank you. And you know, you've got like 4 emails going back and forth on this, right? And all you wanted to do was to say, here's some information. You don't need to reply. Only 3 times have I ever gotten a reply to an email that says, no, but I want to reply. A couple other things is, we've talked a lot about time. Oh, go ahead.
How do you manage, now I just know that you're being in many meetings, something that really irks me is when people are, that they're physically present, and they bring papers to grade, or they're on their phone all the time, and you know, so you're standing meetings when you stand, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that really bothers me. It seems like a lot of time gets wasted because people are in either 2 places, when I'm over here and one down here.
Right, and I think part of it is just trying to cultivate that norm, because certainly that in my immediate department, we have a strong norm of everybody's here, and we don't have, you know, unnecessary and excessive meetings. But when you go to the school, you do have a lot of this. I'm on email, I'm grading papers, you know, other things. I think it's a really hard thing to change, but if you can also say, hey, we're all going to be here, and if we can all be fully present, we can take this long meeting and get our work done. Let's try it. You know, that's the other thing that I would say with all of these. Let's try it. You know, let's try and have a standing meeting, or let's try and all put our, you know, our don't bring any work other than what we're doing at the meeting. But it's tough. It's sometimes very tough to change the norms. We talked, a couple people mentioned kind of the time thing. And if you've never tracked your time, I'd invite you to do that. It's a really powerful exercise People get a lot of insight about where they're spending their time. You know, maybe I'm being interrupted by the same person over and over again. Okay, maybe I need to have a weekly meeting with that person, right? Or maybe I'm doing a lot of interrupting of myself, right? And so how do I think about structuring tasks? You might look at like cadences and when you have energy, the most energy, and you can structure your day. Again, we have a lot of flexibility, but that can be a very powerful thing. And thinking about, is this a task that I can delegate? Is this a task that I can group with other tasks? So for me, I'll often say, okay, if I have to work, let's say there's, you know, these projects are all the things I'm working on. How can I kind of write and have the conference call and, you know, do some data analysis on this project all on that day instead of kind of spacing it out so that my head's completely in it. Classifying tasks as minimum, moderate, maximum. This is something I'm trying to get better at. We're all high achievers. We all think everything has to do it at the maximum level, but it doesn't always have to be at the maximum level, both in a personal and somewhat, you know, and sometimes in our professional lives. So on the personal front, I used to think like, okay, daughter's going to a birthday party. How am I going to find the perfect gift for this child? And what does this person want? And, you know, no, you just go get a gift, right? You just have to get a gift, you know, moderate level or minimum level of effort. Now, obviously, if it's, you know, my grandmother's 95th birthday, yes, then you put in that maximum level of effort. I had a doctoral student who I said, okay, you know, put together the first draft of the IRB application. And he brought me the most beautifully written IRB application. It was beautiful. And I said, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, 3 people are going to read this. And you spend a lot of time doing that because I didn't give him good instruction, right? That this just needs to get done. It doesn't need to get done perfectly at this really high level. And so I think, especially for those of us who supervise others, making sure that we're putting that together. Or I'll have many students tell me like, yes, I worked all weekend getting this number for this report. And it was like, I thought it was an important thing, and they just needed a ballpark estimate, right? And they worked all, you know, hard on it. So a lot of it is just having the conversations. When I get requests, I now put time in my calendar. So if a colleague says, hey, can you, give me a friendly review on a paper? Absolutely, yes. When are you going to send it? Well, okay, here's kind of where I'll send it. Great. Put the time right in my calendar. And because otherwise, you know, I would get the email like, hey, did you read that paper? No, I didn't, because I didn't block the time. And sometimes with working with colleagues, I'll say, all right, you're going to send it to me on Tuesday. I'm going to read it Wednesday morning, and Wednesday afternoon we're going to have a call. And it's all structured and it's all planned. So thinking about how you can, once you say yes to something, go right to your calendar. Really thinking about, is this how I want to spend my time? Or another question that I like to layer over this, is this how the university wants me to spend my time? Or is this how my department wants me to spend my time? And sometimes we find ourselves doing things that other people should be doing, right? That should be delegated or maybe not done at all. And we have to kind of find opportunities to push back and say, I'm not going to do that. That's not my job. That's maybe not how I should be spending my time. Has anybody seen the hell yes or no video? Oh, okay, so Google hell yes or no. It's a 1-minute video. It's worth your minute. The basic punchline of this is when someone asks you to do something, your response should either be hell yes or no. Like nothing in between. Because we all have so many opportunities coming at us, right? And so if you're not super excited about it, then you should probably say no. And I think the whole kind of saying no to things is, sometimes you can say no or turn a no into a hell yes. To say, you know what you're doing, the ask of me, I want to help you, but here's why. I think you really, really just need me for this little part. And I'm super excited about that little part. So I will do that little part, right? Instead of, serve on the committee for 2 years, like you actually just want me to do this one thing. So thinking about how to turn some things into more of a hell yes for you. If I have students do an exercise where they write their obituary. And if you've never written your obituary, it's a very powerful experience because you start to really align your values and think about what is the legacy that I want to leave and how can I kind of get there. Okay, let's move on to have fun. So I started this research with work mood, and one of the things that we found, we were asking people about their work events, right? So what's going on for you at work? Is it a positive event? Is it a negative event with your coworkers, your work tasks? And even though work gets bashed all the time, right? When people talk about work, usually they complain about work. Even though that's the case, our research showed a slightly different picture. We found that positive events were 3 to 5 times more frequent than negative events at work. 3 to 5 times more frequent. So people at work are generally experiencing positive things. However, when we looked at the effects of those things on worker mood, we found that negative events had 5 to 10 times the impact on mood as a positive event. So you got one positive event, one negative event. That negative event packs 5 to 10 times the punch. And interestingly, that 10 times is a negative event related to your manager or supervisor. So again, those of you who supervise others, think about the impact, the power that you have over people's mood states at work. And this is important because we've also shown that being in a positive mood can actually improve your performance. Now, this is not a finding that is surprising, right? Some people have called this the asymmetry effect, or the bad is stronger than good effect. We pay more attention to negative events, negative information. Some would suggest that this is evolution, right? So, the negative threat of the tiger over there versus the pretty field of flowers, like I better pay attention to that negative threat. Only, there's not tigers hiding in the bushes anymore. But thinking about, you can have 20 things happen to you in a day and 19 of them go well. What's the one you're going to go home and talk about? Or what's the one, it's that negative one. So this really troubled me as a researcher because we have all this good stuff happening at work, but it's the negative stuff that's packing the punch. So what do we do about it? Well, along with some colleagues, we did a study that we called the 3 Good Things study. And the intervention was very simple. We asked people at the end of their workday to go and write about 3 good things that happened to them and why. 3 good things and why. That was it. We were in a healthcare clinic and for about a 3-week period, and through that 3-week period, we were assessing the same things we've been talking about: work events, stress, mood. We also were assessing their blood pressure for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and 2 hours in the evening. And these were like the old-fashioned blood pressure cuffs, like so very good readings of blood pressure. And we were, as we talked to people and we were asking them these 3 good things, we heard amazing stories. Okay, amazing stories. But what we were really interested in is not the stories, but whether it improved their workplace well-being, and it did. What we found was a simple practice: 3 good things that happen and why. At the end of each day, it reduced their stress that evening. It reduced their physical symptoms that evening, so like headaches and muscle tension. Reduced their mental complaints, their ability to concentrate. They were more able to detach from work, and it also reduced their blood pressure. Just this really simple practice. Taking time at the end of the day to reflect on the good things that happened and why they happened. For me, I've got, the good things journals aren't so much about work events, but they're more about my kids. So, I try and write a few things each night about something they said or something they did. And let me tell you, I've got my little stack of good things journals now. When we look back, it's the most fun. And I would have never had those memories. They would never have been things that I could have recollected. And it does force me to be a bit more present in the moment because I know I'm going to write about this, right? Oh, okay, I got to remember exactly how he said that and how that went. And it forces you a bit more presence in the moment. So the other line of research is on something called work recovery, which a lot of the work recovery research initially looked at things like vacations, right? So like, how does a vacation help you with your work life? And now the work recovery is much more about how do we embed instances of work recovery into our work lives on a smaller scale, because it's really important for work and well-being outcomes. So a couple routines on this. And you know, I like to think of them as routines because routines can be very powerful. They free up cognitive resources. Like if you know you're going to like park downhill every morning, or maybe it's only, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays, then you've got that in that routine. A couple months ago, there were some articles about Mark Zuckerberg and his gray t-shirt. Like every day, he just goes and picks out a gray t-shirt because it's a routine, and he doesn't have to think about what to wear. If it's cold, he puts a hoodie on, the gray hoodie. So like that's the extent of the decision making that goes on in the morning. And apparently President Obama has like navy and gray suits. That's it. And tells people, I don't care what you bring me for breakfast. Just bring me something for breakfast. Don't even ask me. I don't want to expend any mental energy. So if you have routines, you're not thinking about it all the time. And this is not my research, but other research has shown that people with routines actually live longer. And the routines don't even need to be healthy, like go to the gym. They could be like 6 o'clock old-fashioned or gin and tonic, which is a good routine, right? So create the routines. Okay, so routines for reflecting on the good. The 3 good things, you can do this individually, you can do this at meetings, you can think about, you know, for your project teams, or if you have a lab, like how do we kind of cultivate the good things that happen? Because you don't have to put any attention onto talking about the bad things. It happens naturally. It's just, it happens. But talking about the good things doesn't always happen naturally. A daily gratitude expression or email. I know someone who every single day, this person takes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, writes a gratitude email to say thank you for something. And it may be, you know, it's not always the obvious thing, like thank you for something that you just did yesterday or something that was expected. Sometimes they're very out of the blue. Thank you for that comment that you said like 2 months ago. I've been thinking about it and it really helped take me in a different direction. Like what a great email to get, right? And then usually it comes back to, oh, you know, and then thank you about this. And it's like a good generative thing. Sharing positive events. So research has also shown that, you know, writing, in our research we looked at writing down the positive events, but sharing them with others amps up the goodness that you can get from those positive events. We're working on some research now where we're looking at how parents talk to their children about their events at work, and it's just really fascinating to sort of see that for our children, so often they hear us complain about work, and so how can we think about having those conversations where work becomes, you know, not a bad, stressful thing all the time. Rituals, celebrations around success. Many of you might have things like this. For me, when my student gets their first paper published, they get a really nice bottle of champagne from me. Or if they're not drinkers, they get something else. But you know, that's like the ritual, right? There are things around when projects are completed. Just so think about how can you have those. There's also a lot of apps. I know apps were mentioned earlier that can help you guide you through these things. Build in micro moments for recovery. So for me, those transition routines, I was glad Mara talked about mindful walking because most people, like, where's my phone? Most people are like this going to a meeting, right? They're like looking at their phone and then they arrive at the meeting. Think of how differently you would arrive if you just took a mindful walk to that meeting. You'd arrive in a really different mental state. And it's such a simple thing to do. Thinking about transitions, for me, I call it my garage moment, where I just like sit in the car for a minute so I don't bring the swirl of work into the house and just sort of settle and center and then go into the house. Reclaim the lunch break and coffee hour. Everybody's eating lunch at their desks, pretty much. And I have a colleague at the University of Toronto whose goal and mission in life is to get people to reclaim the lunch break. And he has really compelling evidence that it helps performance, it helps connection to the organization, all sorts of good things just from going to lunch, you know. And it doesn't even have to be every day. It could just be, you know, again, back to that routine idea. We sometimes joke that one of the unintended consequences of fewer people smoking is there's no smoke breaks anymore, right? I mean, there's no one takes a break to go and smoke and socialize and get outside. So I'm not advocating smoking, just to be clear, but somehow to sort of put those routines in. Integration of nature. I'm so pleased to have this beautiful window to look out at, because the research on work recovery or recovery in nature is really interesting. Not work that I have done, but here's an example. Researchers bring people into a lab, they have them do a performance task, and then they randomize people to conditions. You guys go take a walk around this park-like arboretum setting. You guys go take a walk around campus town, more urban environment, and then come back in to the lab setting. The folks that had that experience in the nature environment, their performance improved markedly. So when they went back to the task. And of course, you know, the researchers, oh, well, it's because of the oxygen levels in the air and the, you know, helps the brain. Okay. So they did the same thing, except they only showed them screensaver pictures of either a nature environment or an urban environment. They found the same effect. There's something restorative about nature. I have a good friend at Google, and she asks her employees, you know, whenever she's having like her, you know, twice yearly status, like, when's your next vacation? When's it scheduled? To really show that it is okay to be taking that time. And sleep. We could do a whole thing on sleep, but getting more sleep, the evidence is so clear that the performance benefits that you will accrue from getting more sleep far outweigh that extra, you know, hour that you put in late at night. So get more sleep. Okay, choose kind. So in this research where we were looking at people over time, we found an interesting pattern. People were in a bad mood, they helped another person, and then they were in a good mood. So bad mood, help another person, good mood. Helping others had what we called a mood repair mechanism. This effect was particularly pronounced for extroverted individuals. So if you're an extroverted person, you get a bigger mood boost when you help others. And so when we think about it, we're, you know, as faculty members, we're often helping people, right? We're often helping people. But I think a lot of times we don't take the time to think about it in that way, right? Or think about it as reflecting on it as a helping, you know, a helping action. There's some really interesting work to try and get at how can we take these pro-social jobs and kind of transcend to talk about them in this way that we're helping others. Another theme in my research is on victimization. And when we look at that tall poppy, that field of poppies, and we got that one sticking out, what do you want to do? You just want to like take it down, right? You just want to take that poppy down. Well, it's something called, it's been called the tall poppy syndrome, that when the person's sort of sticking out, you want to take them down. And in our research on workplace victimization, when I say victimization, I mean like undermining, incivility, gossip, withholding information. High performers are more likely to be victimized at work. And there are a couple things that can mitigate this effect. One of them is high performers are more likely to be victimized unless they're high on what we refer to as communal traits. These are traits where you're very other-oriented. You're nice, right? So you can be a high performer, but you better be nice. The other thing that can mitigate this is working in a work group that's a very cooperative climate, so that one person's successes are really all of our successes. And you know, something that caught my ear early this morning is how this profession is very individualistic in many ways, that we all kind of build our own brands and not think about the greater collective. So how can we think about choosing kind and connecting? One of the things is think about how do we link our work outcomes back to those beneficiaries. And I think that undoubtedly we have all touched people with our research, with our teaching, with our outreach in some way. But are there ways to kind of feed that back? Is that coming back to us? Do we understand the impact that we have had on others. I don't think we often do a good job of that. Medtronic is a good example of how every year at their Christmas party, they bring in people who have been changed by their life-saving technology. And they talk to the employees about, what it has meant for them. And I have never attended one of these, but I hear they're just very powerful, very moving, people crying, and that they have a good understanding of what they're doing and how it's impacting other people. I did research once at a bicycle helmet manufacturing company. And, a bicycle helmet, you've got the shell, you've got the foam core, you've got the straps, and people were assembling these bicycle helmets. And I was like, oh boy, that's probably not a job I'd love. That seems kind of boring. But they didn't see it as assembling bicycle helmets, because when you went into their break room, the wall was filled with pictures, letters, cards of people who have been saved by their helmets. And so part of it is just really reframing the work that we do, and kind of underscoring that pro-social element. And thinking about experiences that underscore that pro-social. So as I said, I've got kids, 10 and 12. It sounds like lots of people in the room do as well. And you ask that question, how was school today? Or what happened at school today? You don't get too much, or at least in my house, you don't get too much, right? Try this question. To whom were you a good friend today? And you are immediately kind of setting up the expectation for kids to think about, that how am I connecting with other people in my environment? How am I, how can I have an impact on someone? And you get these great stories, and it really opens up a good conversations about relationships. Opportunities to help others, helping, one of the things that I often feel we could do better at, probably as a university, is thinking more about how do we leverage the knowledge that we have. So thinking about how we can share that knowledge and help others, but we need to know where those pockets of knowledge exist, right? So I could provide X for this. Like this, I'm really good at this. Everybody in this room has a superpower, right? So what's your superpower, and how can you share that superpower? Because sometimes that's, back to that hell yes or no, sometimes that's a way to turn something into a hell yes, right? If I can deploy my talents in a really specific way, that's going to be more fulfilling for me, and it's going to be a hell, you can turn it into a hell yes. Okay, be present. So Mara set us up really nicely for this, but I want to give you a little bit of background. Probably almost 10 years ago now, some colleagues and I were hearing about mindfulness at work, mindfulness at work. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. This is the latest management fad trend that, there's no evidence for it, but everybody's kind of jumping on the mindfulness bandwagon, right? And about that same time, I was approached to write a chapter on workplace victimization. And I said, no. I mean, this was a hell yes or no moment. I was not a hell yes. And so I said, no, I don't really want to do that, but I'm really interested in this mindfulness at work thing. And so are two other colleagues. And we don't know anything about it. We're not experts, but you know us. We'll do a good job. We'll become experts. And so fortunately, this person said, sure. And we delved into the literature, psychological literature, the literature in medicine, the neuroscience. We went over the Center for Spirituality and Healing and took an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course collectively. We went to a local meditation center, and we talked with mindfulness meditators and asked them, how does this influence your work? And so we brought all these themes together in this chapter. And what I can tell you is my skepticism about this topic turned into a very, very healthy belief. There's something here. There's something here around being present, being more mindful. I liked Mara's definition of the 2 wings of the compassion as well as the attention, because I think it really brings us back to how do we live our lives in a way that's more fully present, fully aware, greater attention. So, and that chapter, I can honestly say, was one of the most fun things to write. And it like won an award, and I've never gotten so many emails from people saying, "Oh, it's a great chapter," you know. So, get what you want, right? I could have just had that chapter in victimization. So I love this because this is us, right? This is us. Beautiful trees, you got the dog, the sun, and you know, nowhere in this person's mind is what's in front of them. Look at the dog, you know, sees the sun. So we're all in this, you know, in this mindful state. So what are some things that we can do so that we can at least appreciate these things? I saw that that Mara passed out some mindfulness assessments, but I'll just let you look at some of these. You know, it seems I'm running on automatic. I find myself listening with one ear, doing another thing. Someone introduces themselves and you've already forgotten their name. It probably happened. You guys are busted. You know it happened today. Almost as soon as you're told it, rushing through activities, being on autopilot, or like you get into a room and you're like, what am I doing here again? Why am I here? I love this phrase, are you in a state of continuous partial attention? You know, where you're just kind of, you know, rumbling through life in this continuous partial attention. Because we have this sense that we can multitask, right? But multitasking is not really multitasking. You're not doing two things at once. You're very rapidly shifting your attention back and forth between things. And multitasking, if one of the things needs very little attention, you know, you can do that, right? So something like, you know, washing dishes and listening to the radio. Okay, those are two things I can do at once because they don't, you know, have those cognitive energies deployment that's hefty. But if you think of something like, how many of you have been on conference calls while you're trying to write emails? How well does that work, right? Because both of those things really need your cognitive attention. So you simply can't multitask. You're going back and forth. So thinking about, you know, how do you change this state of continuous partial attention and, you know, and become more present. I'm going to sort of skip through that. I'm going to tell you about one more study that we're working on right now. Most of the research on mindfulness shows benefits for the mindfulness practitioner, but we wanted to know, can people pick this up, right? So we worked with a healthcare clinic out in California. And for about a month, we're out there studying their workers. And the study went something like this. For the first week, we were surveying, it was like a baseline week. So we were surveying them on their work lives and stress. We were also surveying the patients that were coming through the clinic and their experiences and interactions with the participants in our study. And then weeks 2 and 3, they were randomly assigned to a 10-minute mini mindfulness intervention or an active control condition. So in the 10-minute mindfulness intervention session at the start of their shift, they'd come in, they'd pick up a little audio recording of 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation, or they'd pick up a 10-minute podcast on exercise, sleep, wellness, a wellness podcast. And what we were really interested in is, can the patients detect a difference? And they did. What we found were the patients reported that the individuals who were in the mindfulness condition were more attentive. They were more flexible in their responding in terms of what they were going to do. And they were more able to take the person's perspective. So the patients are reporting this. And so I think this idea that we really can see when someone is fully present with us, right? We can detect this from others. We know when we're being listened to. We know when people are paying attention. I remember a story where I was coming home and quickly making dinner, and I'm like chopping the vegetables, and I'm thinking, I'm not even here. Like, I'm not even present here chopping the vegetables. So, I just kind of start chopping the vegetables. My husband looks at me, he goes, "You just got mindful there, didn't you?" I was like, "Yes." So you really can kind of pick this up from people. Okay. So some ideas. I think we had some great ideas. Try the mindful breathing. There's a lot of really good apps that have like 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just a few minutes. 4-7-8 breathing is something that can help to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Let's take 19 seconds and do it. Okay, what I'm going to do, you're going to breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, breathe out for 8. Okay, everybody ready? I'll walk you through it. Okay, breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've all just activated your parasympathetic nervous system. So great. The walking mindfully, thinking about things you do on a regular basis and doing them more mindfully. Like when you wash your hands, washing those hands really mindfully. If you haven't driven without your radio or on the phone lately, try this. You're like, wow, I'm actually driving this car. And it's sort of like when you're in a snowstorm or rain, right? And you like turn the radio off and you're like, everybody be quiet, and you're like totally focused on driving. That's what this is like. And so you can have these instances of sort of full presence in your activity. Thinking about kind of the bodily awareness. So figuring out where your tell is, right? Like where you hold your stress. For me, it's my shoulders. Like they're up like this, when I get tense. But kind of doing that check-in. Thinking about a purposeful pause. This is one of the things that we found in our research. People have automatic responses. We wouldn't get through our day if we didn't have a certain amount of automaticity in what we do. But sometimes we need to sort of override that automaticity and slow it down and pause, and then we can come to a different reaction. And so mindfulness can help you do that. So thinking about, how are you going to start your day, pausing before you pick up the phone. All these things are just small little practices. I mean, with all of these, the way that I talk about my research is I talk about them as micro interventions, right? These are small things that individuals can do. None of this requires institutional change, right? This requires personal change. And so I always think about that, we spend so much time finding a good job, but we can also spend time making a job good, right? And I think that there are some practices here. So let's see, I think, in summary, work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present. I also have, I'm going to put these at the back, little magnets. You don't have to take one, but if you want to take one, feel free to take one as a little reminder for the day. And I think I'm about out of time, unless, can I get maybe a question or? Okay. Oh. Yeah. No. Yes. I put it down right after the body of the message and right at the end. Yep, that's when I do it.
While we continue to ask questions, Maddie will be coming around to collect your evaluations and also tear up the bottom part, put in the basket for the drawing.
Yes.
I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about how you turn this into a hell yes, because
Okay.
because we do get asked to do a lot, and especially I'm an assistant professor, so how do I say hell yes instead of not being able to say no?
Right. And so here's a couple tips that I've learned. I think one tip is never say yes right away. So I think you should always kind of say, I'm going to think about that, and let me ask you a couple questions, like how am I uniquely suited for this committee, or is there a reason that you kind of want me to do this? The other thing that I have found is I don't have the capacity for that right now, but if you want to check back in a month, I might feel differently about that. And most of the time they never come back, right? But just being able to say, I'm not saying no, I'm saying no right now. No for right now. So those are a couple of strategies. Or something like, if you need me to do it now, the answer is no, but if I can do it over the summer, then I can help. Or to scope it so that, again, so that you can think like, well, here's the piece of what you're talking about that's exciting to me. Is there a way that I can do this? So you're saying no to the big ask and hell yes to a smaller ask. I don't know if those help. Maybe others in the room have ideas as well. And the other thing, I forgot to mention this. I think the other thing, the question that I often get, and I didn't spend as much time on it, is how to manage email and these phones that we have, right? And I just want to share two things. One is the phone is, if you look at research on reinforcement, actually done by B.F. Skinner, who was a famous behavioral psychologist who had a career here at the University of Minnesota. Interestingly, my husband and I, who's also a psychologist, almost bought his house over in Yew Grove only because it was B.F. Skinner's house, which is the wrong reason to buy a house. But anyway, one of the things he found in his research on reinforcement, things are most like, you know, you can get that rat to hit the pellet, right, being reinforced, when the reinforcement schedule is uncertain and unpredictable. And uncertain in content and unpredictable in timing. And so when you think about email, that's what email is, right? It's uncertain in content and it's unpredictable in timing. So we keep hitting that, we just keep hitting that email the same way the rat would hit the bar to get the pellet. It's kind of like a slot machine, right? We just never know what we're going to get. We don't know if it's going to be this great email, you know, where they're accepting our paper, or, you know, a Target ad. We just don't know. And so we're always kind of hitting that. The other thing that the really interesting work, there's a researcher by the name of Sherry Turkle who was just here a couple weeks ago, and she does research on how cell phones are changing our social interactions, and how, like, really quickly in a study, they would bring strangers into a lab setting, and those strangers would just have a conversation about what it was like, you know, to be at that university. And on the end of the table, there was either the experimenter's cell phone, not their cell phone, the experimenter's cell phone, it didn't beep, it wasn't on, nothing was happening, or there was a pad of paper. When the cell phone was present, the mere presence of the cell phone, third-party observers of that conversation rated it as lower quality. The participants themselves said that they were less likely to want to meet with that person again. They didn't enjoy the conversation as much. Just that mere presence of a cell phone that wasn't even theirs. And so you know, thinking about how do we kind of use the technology for good and not evil, I think that's another piece, is really thinking about, you know, who can spend your time but you? Who can deploy your attention but you? And really kind of using some of these tools and techniques to shape our time. So I think my time is up. Thank you so much.